Let's bust the myth about gladiators dying in every fight. That's the movies. In fact, if your gladiator died, it was really bad for business. We often think, thanks to Hollywood and I'm Maximus Decimus Meridian and all the rest of it, that gladiators fought until the very death. In reality, economically speaking, it did not make sense for that to happen to your gladiator. You see, when you got your gladiator, number one, it cost you money because you were 9 times out of 10 buying a slave in the first place. You then had to feed them. You had to train them for many years. You had the medical costs attached with having this fighting person. And they brought in money. You could make money from their fights. You could also make money from renting them out. In fact, in the rental clauses, they have found penalties for if the gladiator died. So it very much was a business decision to keep these people alive. That is, unless you were a convicted criminal. Then they really didn't care if you lived or died. And that gets us on to another point. The idea of the thumb signalling whether someone lived or died. They haven't actually found any definitive proof of exactly how submission or allowing a gladiator to live was signalled. They do know that there were rules around gladiatorial fights. They had a referee who was called a Summa Rudis. And when somebody was got to the floor, they would put their hand up, their arm up, their finger up to signal that they wanted to submit, that they wanted to be saved. And then the referee would come in and it would go to the editor. And you think like, oh, newspaper. No, real Roman word. Editor was the person who'd normally put the fight on. So you're looking at emperors in the majority. And they would then have to make the decision to miso, which is to give the right to survive, to allow the person to submit and to walk away. And the idea is, we see it, don't we, especially in the Gladiator film, thumbs up and the thumbs down and playing with the crowd. That idea of the thumb, which is called the pollice verso, is the painting 1872 by a guy called Gironi. And no, nobody actually knows if that is the truth. I don't think that it was actually done like that with the closed fist. You tell me, do you have more exact information than that? Because I looked and I could not find the thumbs up, thumbs down. It seems to be very much to be decided. The other thing about gladiators that was a reason that you wouldn't want them to die is they actually became like star entertainers. These people drew the crowds. They could command big fees. I'm imagining a lot of them went to their handlers, but they became stars in their own rights and eventually could earn their own freedom. We see it in Gladiator, and actually the idea of the wooden sword and the gaining of one's freedom and being able to retire really did happen. There's a very famous fighter who actually refused 4 times the right to be set free. He's a slave from Syria. He's called Flamma. I hope I say that right, or Flamma. And on his gravestone, it talks about his 34 fights he survived. Now, you have to think how brutal it was in a ring, in the Colosseum. We're talking swords and bayonets and all manner of things to stab and maim and kill with. Unless you were a Bestiarius and then you were fighting actual wild animals, which equally as dangerous as another man fighting for his own life. So to survive 34 fights is incredible. And yeah, this guy ended up being buried in Sicily, and his gravestone bears his story. Deaths did happen. A lot. You've just got to think about it. You're dealing with swords and weapons and sharp things and animals, and even with the best medical care in the world, infections could have set in, illness could have set in. So yes, deaths did happen, but ordinarily fights to the death were not what gladiators were up to. If you're a Christian, if you're a convicted criminal and you ended up in these rings, in the Colosseum, life was going to turn out extremely differently for you. However, for star gladiators, absolutely fighting to the death was not the thing. You have to see it, you probably have to see it this way. Being a gladiator, like the ones on the TV we see, it was a show. These were stars. And there were rules, referees, everything around it to make it as safe and productive as possible, and mean that these guys stayed alive as long as was humanly possible to continue their craft. It's kind of, can you think of a sport like that today? In a ring, referees, people shouting when they're in submission poses. Yeah? Let me know in the comments box below, because when you look at those type of fighters, I definitely think it's harking back to the gladiatorial way. Are you mad about histories and mysteries and you love what I share on this channel? If so, go in the description box, find the link, share your email address with me, and I will surprise you with something mysterious and fabulous in your inbox.